What is reality, and how can we broaden our definitions and relationships to it?
So when you think about, well, what can I do? What I did was start expanding my ability to interact with that which was not number one reality.
Welcome to the Frequency Files. Thanks for joining us as we explore the vibrations, forms, and creations and mechanisms behind them that inform the nature of existence. Today, we've got a very special guest, Randy Veitenheimer, who's an energy healer and a true modern day medicine man and artist. Randy is a member of the Potawotami tribe from Oklahoma, and he learned at a really young age the power of plants and vibration in the healing process and in the journey of expanded consciousness and evolution. And at around the age of 19, he began his in depth studies of martial arts, which led him to other forms of energy transfer and healing practices from around the world, training and working directly with renowned masters, teachers, and healers. Randy's developed a healing method he calls creative energetic healing. Randy is a true font of wisdom, and we're very honored to have him here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you. I always like talking to people down under. Oklahoma, which is where I'm at now,
Yeah.
and Australia are identical. They were both territories, and they were both repositories for every crook and outlaw and everything you can imagine. They all dumped into Oklahoma territory. Not to
Ah,
say some good people might have come along in Australia or Oklahoma, but it's an interesting like what they thought of both of our places,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I had a student of mine one time, and he was acting out a little bit. And I said, "Well, you have Oklahoma problem." And he's like, "What?" And I said, "Well, you were raised in Oklahoma, so you were raised to be an outlaw. You were raised to be a somebody that is, let's say, boisterous and somebody who drinks and fights and all these things." And I said, "You're not in Oklahoma, number one. And number two, you're getting a little old for that." So, so that's all entertaining when you're young, but a
Yeah.
little later, maybe you get tired of all the scars and stuff. So, um,
How did that
anyway,
go down?
yeah, so I was able to reset him to kind of move him away from what would be called a morphic field, an overall overlay of consciousness, and it's called geomorphic programming. Everybody has it; they just don't realize it. So anyway, that's the interesting thing I found about Australia and Oklahoma both, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about the geomorphic
Oh
process,
yeah.
yeah, programming, and how that overlays, particularly when we've got indigenous cultures, then colonizing or invading cultures, migrant cultures. How does they stack on each other?
Well, you just said several words that apply to Oklahoma and Australia both. We have indigenous cultures. They moved every Indian they could grab hold of, moving them to Oklahoma. There were some here to begin with. A lot were here, and it was their territory. And the same thing, Australia. They called them Aborigines. Here we call them natives, right? But all of them were colonized by England. We have that in common. They were subjugated to English law when that was never part of their existence, right?
Yeah.
And then here we go with the religion and schooling and everything else. So geomorphic programs really interesting. It's like somebody says, "Well, I was born in Salt Lake City, United States." what's the chances of them being born Mormon? It's 95% Mormon. So then you say, well, I'm Church of England. Well, that's England, right? What's the chance you're born somewhere other than England with that is very low. And then what's the chance you're born in Iraq or Iran and you're Muslim? You see, it's like, so now we go, do you have a religion or were you born somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, and so then we'll extend it. Do you dress a certain way? I mean, so now we have culture that's all backed up by that. And, and, um, and that's interesting. Like Native American, I go to our meetings and what they call powwows, gatherings, and a lot of people like to wear traditional outfits. So I don't think you see that too much in Australia, where people are trying to mimic our culture that way. But you go to someplace like Texas, and that everybody's got cowboy hats and cowboy boots and belt buckles, and it's a lifestyle and a clothing style that's 150, 200 years old. And we're like, what's up with that? And so it's the same kind of thing, but it's like, time moves on. It's like, why wouldn't you evolve your culture, your ideals of a religion or government or whatever? But instead, they just tend to hang on until somebody tells you, wearing cowboy hats in New York City just doesn't work. You see, that's a geomorphic issue. And in the same way, a three-piece suit doesn't work in Arizona in the middle of the desert. So, so we're under all these influences. We've gathered them up and hugged them to ourselves, and we call ourselves Australians or Americans or Mexicans or whatever, right? But it all comes with a culture, a way of dressing. They all come with a religion. They all come with a political structure, and it takes being outside of it. It takes traveling to understand that you're seeing something different, and hopefully be able to turn around and look at your own and at least say, well, this suits me. In other words, it's the idea of not to find fault with it. It's just that to understand that you didn't invent it. Okay. If you do invent something new in the way of culture or clothing or any of those systems, we call you avant-garde or crazy, right? That's another term.
Mm.
But um, I think it's interesting. Like, I don't know in the United States, but there's been a lot of turning towards learning what we as Native Americans knew and know and experience in life compared to maybe other people. And Aborigines in Australia the same way. They know things different than you do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I grew up in that kind of family or that kind of culture, and until I was about 12 or 13, I thought that was all normal. So when I got out in the rest of the world, I realized there were white people, So that's
Wow.
what. Right. I mean, they were around, but your whole family's Native American, your cousins, that's your culture and family that you hang out with, and it's pretty extensive, so it takes up your time. And then you step out into the world, we say. So we do the same thing with our consciousness. We get born, and eventually we step out in the world, not knowing, kind of like all the clothes we're wearing, you know. All the overlays, all the programs. That's the one thing I want to work on people is get rid of a bunch of programs. Um, the major one is that you need to make everybody else in the world happy. So,
Yeah.
second one is you need to save the world. I love that one.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like in my spare time, I will save the world. Right. So I'm probably a little too what they call sarcastic for all this, but I'll try to rein it in. Okay, so we can get started, right? So,
No, just be you. I love it. Um, I just from what you were sharing before, I would love to know what was it like for your 12-year-old self when you stepped out of, I suppose, living more in a First Nations context in the reservations to the broader environment. What was that like, and what was that like for your psyche? What was that like energetically to interface with those two worlds?
well, we condition our space. You think about your home, it's conditioned like people walk in the way it smells, the way it
Yeah,
feels, the way it looks, right?
yeah,
So we take our senses like that and move them into a new environment, walking in somebody's house, walking in outdoors or whatever. It's more extensive than that, right?
yeah, yeah,
You're walking into a belief system.
yeah,
You're walking into thousands of years that have conditioned that space and or have learned from it. Okay.
yeah,
So we would say that the Aborigines learned from Australia, right? People that were later moved there didn't learn from Australia.
yeah,
They're very new to the game. And
yeah,
in the same way, I lived on a native reservation in Arizona when I was a child. Well, I'd been in more of a white environment, we'll call it a colonized environment. I don't know what all language,
yeah,
but you grow up with behavior patterns and belief systems and all these things. And I tell people, if you go to New Mexico and Arizona, I promise you that's a different universe. So when I was out there when I was 4 and 5 and 6, and later when I was like 10, 11, 12, and and it's a different world.
yeah,
It's a this this I'll give an example. What we consider spirits, uh, entities. It's a vast population, and it's closer than you think anywhere else.
yeah,
So you have a sense that there's beings, that there's literally what I call information all over the place,
yeah.
and so some people aren't prepared for it, and so they hate the desert. Well, Australia has the desert, and people hate the desert there, we'll say. And unless you grow up in it, and then you love it. And I'm one of those that loves the desert.
Mm.
I know that everything basically you touch or look at or whatever will kill you. You know, that's the same, I guess, in the Australia outback as in Arizona, New Mexico. It's really funny because even as a kid, you learn to walk and not touch anything. Yeah, because like when you learn to walk through the woods and the terrain and I mean you come out of it and you could wear white clothes and not have a spot on you, right? And then somebody not from there, like they walk by what we call cholla cactus, they can walk by within 5 feet and be covered with them, and
Oh
they're
God.
barbs that are almost impossible to get out, like hours, right? So it's the funniest thing in the world. Um, I've trained some people like in what we call special forces here, and they do training out there. And every one of them, I say, whatever you do, if you're new to the area, don't go out at night. Okay.
Mm, mm.
And for people out there that live in a world that doesn't have spirits and entities and ghosts and all that,
Yeah,
you don't need to be in the desert and those places at night. I promise
yeah,
you. Right?
yeah, yeah,
All the hair on your arms will stand
yeah,
up. Right?
yeah.
You'll have a sense that what we call a dimensionally stable world, like you're used to in a city, that is not true out there, right? And so,
100%.
yeah, and
Yeah.
so anyway, it's a fascinating thing because oscillating between the desert and back and forth, and I lived in New Mexico again later, and the reason I keep returning, I love it out there. I
Mm.
love the desert. You're more expansive with your energy field.
Yeah.
There's information available from what I call the field,
Yeah.
from your surroundings or environment, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But you get in cities and you just get overwhelmed with different frequencies, you know,
100%.
vibrations. That's a good language, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So much of what you say just mirrors what so many aunties and uncles say here. First Nations aunties and uncles say, don't go in the desert at night. And that out in the desert, like I've done some work in Alice Springs and gone to different places there, and just put your feet in the sand and you can feel the pulse of the prana in the
yeah,
land. It's like instant. And I was working with First Nations kids. They're so tuned in. I would be doing energy healing on them. None of them said, "What are you doing?" Like none of them. None of them. Just like,
yeah, yeah. I laugh. The planet has a 26-second pulse. Most people don't pick it up, right? We have a von Neumann frequency of 7.8 that lately has been everywhere from zero negative to thousands, right?
yeah,
So so if you think about the overall background going wonky, right? Why wouldn't you feel off or different, or why wouldn't there be changes going on around you and stuff, you
yeah,
know?
absolutely.
And I tell people pour a cup of tea and watch it go on. You know, you can't get too excited, you know. So, so
um,
anyway, it's just if you there's different places in the world, and it seems kind of stupid to say, but there's also different places in the world. Yeah. And what that means, different worlds in those
in
places, I
those
guess
places.
would be the reciprocal, yeah. And and once you start experiencing them, like you don't ever get to be the same again, I guess, you know.
Yeah. 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 People can be in the same geographical location, but be in a different space. Like,
Yes, yes, yes.
yeah.
So,
And I suppose that leads to, and this is a pretty broad and deep question. What
mhm.
is consciousness?
Ah, but it's what's the oldest car you ever drove?
Oh. I think it was like this really falling apart ute. I lived on a farm. We had this little truck thing. I don't know how old it was, but it was pretty old.
Okay, did it have a radio in it? In it?
I don't think
Yeah,
so.
yeah. The early trucks didn't have them, but they finally started about the 50s putting radios in. They did it before, but pretty much every car after that. And the original ones had like 5 buttons. Okay, so so we look at that, and those buttons were preset, or you could program them.
Mm,
And each button would go to a different station, a different information source. So when we start talking about geomorphic, and there's others, there's all kinds of fields that make all this space up or whatever. Um, we don't think that we might have 5 preset buttons or
mm,
10 or 15 or 20 or whatever. And so basically everybody has about 30. That's my research. And so you think about, well, one of them produces country and Western music, one of them religious stations, one of them rock and roll, one of them, I mean, you can just look at classical. We have all these terms, right, for the music. And and then you get all enamored with what particular music is coming in. Okay. And that becomes your identity. Okay.
yeah.
And so if you listen to country and western and dress in cowboy boots and a cowboy hat, and here we go, right? So, so people don't think about that as they immerse themselves in it. But
Mm,
the radio is the key. Okay. So the radio is your body. Okay. That's it. And so you can call it your body, your brain. But if we step away from what I call classical physics, which is the physicality of everything, We get into energy, which is what I practice, energy medicine. And we get into the idea that information is being transmitted, like your frequency and vibration thing. And when we do that, then we go, well, you can upgrade, you can get different radios, you can press different buttons, but that's not your consciousness. Your consciousness is what's receiving and broadcasting that into the channel you're listening to. That's a real rough language, okay? But you're not the radio. A lot of people, as physicists particularly, um, plus some other systems, religious and political, want to tell you you're the radio, you're the physical
Correct.
body.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not true
Yeah.
because one of the things that happens is like, do you ever hear your own voice in your head?
Yeah. Like
Everybody,
as in hearing your thought forms or like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
everybody hears their own voice.
Yeah.
Everybody hears their own thoughts, and there's a phenomenon called latency in how energy travels. It takes time. And if you go, well, I had a thought, well, the thought had to originate somewhere.
Yeah.
And it had to go through the processing of the brain, even though it's very, very small and minute, millisecond type thing.
Yeah.
So then everybody wants to teach you about your thoughts. Okay. But if that thought occurred before, and it had to before you could think it, and then for you to express it is another latency issue, another time issue.
Yeah.
Then we go, well, where was the thought before it was available to me?
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, you're into an area of physics that I call field physics.
Yeah.
Uh, you go completely away from Planck and what we call physicality. So he made a scale of all that. I made a scale of all the energy that occurs at different levels. All the so once you go out of the physicality of existence, you go into the field of existence, the consciousness of existence. So now we say consciousness is that which generates reality. There you
Mm-hmm.
go.
Mm-hmm.
That's a beautiful way to explain it without
Mm-hmm.
without explaining anything. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
how you like that one?
No, I love it. I love it. And I'm thinking, depending on where different people are at, they can find their own connection points to
Mhm.
see and to identify with how it's real for them and how they're experiencing it now and how they can broaden or enhance their experience of it because that's always available to people, right? Like it's not
Right.
it's not a special few get chosen thing. Like these latent abilities lay within all of us, and it's like you were saying, switching um, the radio dial and removing everything that's not us.
Right. Right.
Programming, conditioning, attachments, blah blah blah, blah. It goes on. To plug more fully into that and commit to that. Yeah.
That's why most people identify as the music.
Mm.
And then now you move upward, outward, whatever we call it. You identify the music's coming from the radio, right? That's not true. There's a speaker. Remember that? So if you say, well, identify the music, no, you're identifying with the vibration that's coming from the speakers, which is coming from the electromagnetic state of the here. And all of a sudden it's like, man, this goes on forever, right?
Yeah.
So when I was first looking at all this, I described number one reality is everything you can experience with your senses. Okay.
Hmm.
And most people take that as reality. And they don't think about when I go to sleep or when I close my eyes. Well, that's a reality too, only we call that zero reality. That's what I call it. And then science says, well, the universe is only 1% of matter or energy, and the rest of it is dark matter, dark energy. And I go, that's true. 1% is the reality of this world and your body and everything you can touch and feel and five senses again. But everything else is in that 99%. So it's a lot bigger world than you think it is. Okay. A lot bigger universe. And what I teach is don't confine yourself. In other words, look at the music, look at the radio, look at the speakers, look at just keep going. Somebody's broadcasting it. What well, that's your thoughts. Who's broadcasting my thoughts? And right now in the United States and around the world is the NSA and CIA, but
Mm,
that's
mm,
my opinion.
mm.
We call it the media or whatever.
Yeah.
And anyway, you just keep exploring, you just keep getting to finer and finer frequencies.
Mm,
Um, and when you talk about conscious, I haven't locked it down yet, um, because I think it's a combination of all the ones I'm thinking of.
mm,
Planck scale goes from densest matter to the smallest particle. Like if you hear things talk about CERN, they're concerned with particles. All right.
yeah.
So we go, Planck goes from 1 to 36. And what I did is start at 36 and go to 72. And each one of them is a finer frequency and a higher energy, by the way. And Dr. David Hawkins wrote a book on consciousness
Mm,
and power versus force. And he has a chart on there, and people look at, the emotions and all these different states of consciousness. But what he's stating is an energetic state.
yeah.
And he talked about that in his lectures. So those correspond somewhat to what I'm talking about. And what I love is nobody's ever really described what electricity is. They talk about it, our world's based on it. They describe conscious, but there's no real definition.
Mm,
And what I truly love is life force. And
mm,
so my scale, that's 71. At least I've identified it, you know,
mm,
36 up to 72, 71's life force. And then here we go. Where's it broadcasting from? Who's creating the music or the life force that's coming into us and making us alive? So this thing gets really, really deep really fast. And basically, your intellect and scientists can't touch it. They won't. They can't. They cannot come up with how all this works. So they ignore it and propagate their new religion, which is called science. So there. That's my little rant.
No, yeah, I vibe with you on that. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. Like there's this rejection of a more spiritual based connection and yet a religiosity around scientific materialism. And I never quite got that. Even as a kid, of like when they're teaching science, I was like, it's
Yeah.
almost like the metrics and the tools and the degree of consciousness of those trying to measure them just aren't a match for that next leap. So they
Yeah.
can't. It's just not in their wheelhouse.
Yeah. The reason I keep mentioning music is because I tell people you can learn everything about life you need to know by studying country and western music or rock and roll, right? That's it. And what's the one song? I want to know what love is. I think
Oh
it's
yeah.
German, right? Go ask some scientist. And and something funny about that is I was at a science and conscious conference like in 1999 or something, and I'm with all these top physicists, like from around the world. I think it's Dr. Bill Tiller and another one, and they're very famous. And I'm walking with them, and one of them said, "Well, you can't prove anything of what you do when you like work on people and help people energetically." And I go, and his wife was with him, and I said, "Well, can you prove you love your wife?" And he went blank, and she like smacked him. And I just started talking to him, and she goes, "You're coming to dinner with us." He said, she understood what I was talking. Her
Yeah.
husband was involved in all this proof, right?
Mm.
and prove you love me. I mean, that's going to be fun. Roses, jewelry, right? Dinners. I mean, there's a whole big show there, right? So, so I sat down to dinner with them and explained that the intellect can only explain, I'm going to say half of reality, but that's probably generous.
That, yeah,
And the rest of it cannot be explained by the intellect. I can't
yeah,
explain why I love you.
yeah.
I can know that
Oh,
I do. And so the intellect for the scientific, the under 500 in Hawkins chart, which is the intellect, cannot explain that which is above 500 because that's knowingness. And now we're into spirituality and meditation and mantras and Tibetan bells. I don't know what all. Crystals. How's that? So, you see how the world diverged, right? It went separate directions, and you cannot, as a rule, make the other side see what the heck you're talking about. So,
yeah. I guess unless they're willing to sit in a paradigm that acknowledges and moves beyond binaries.
yes, yes. And that's the other thing I teach is like we live in a duality of zero and one. Number one reality, everything you can touch and play with and all that. Zero is everything you can't.
Yeah,
Okay. It's
yeah,
all the fields and all the information, and consciousness itself is a field. And then the other one I teach is what's called neutral. It's actually the interface between zero and one. And that interface is very, very, we'll call it thick for most people. Like they can't, like scientists can't jump to the spiritual side as a rule. They keep talking about it, but they call it the God particle, which is stupid in my opinion. And because it just can't be true. So, excuse me, when we look at that, if we can shrink that interface or expand it, whichever way you want to look at it, to be inclusive of both of them, now we have what they call unity of consciousness, singularity. And I love that language because science wants to say there's like atomic force, electric force, magnetic force, gravity force. And then they keep going, oh, we're going to find a grand unified theory, okay, of all forces in the universe. And I've never heard one of them include consciousness as a force of the universe. And it is probably the greatest force in the universe because look at us, right? So,
well, it
look,
underpins all of it, right?
yeah, yeah, you can't dream this up. The Aborigines may be able to, but most people can't
Yeah.
because they have dream state. They use dream state.
Yeah.
And to me, dream state's a working state, by the way. My girlfriend makes fun of me because she'll see me working in the middle of the night. So I'm using that time.
Mm.
So the interface is what we need to work on. We work on it through yoga, spiritual disciplines. We work on it by being graceful or kind or loving, listening to country and western music, things like that. So,
How do some people, and you just mentioned what you're doing in your dream state, how do
huh?
some people use their abilities to consciously, or maybe some people do it unconsciously,
Right,
work with frequency to shift states? And that might be collapsing time, quantum
right.
leaping, bilocating.
Yeah, I love all those things. And 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 I've worked or done things that for some reason have made those more available and extant than people who have not done anything to go that direction. I get a lot of questions. People go, "How do you do this?" And I go, "Well, just have you tried it? It's like driving a car. Have you ever tried driving a car before you start talking about, you want to be a long haul trucker or something, Same thing flying a plane. Everybody talks about it, but like, this is going to take some work. And nobody understands or seems to understand that even when they call me, it's like this takes a while, you know. It's not, I charge for appointments and stuff, but I said the greater cost is you're going to have to commit time to yourself. And and then they go, well, how much? And I go, I don't know. I used to do about 8 hours a day, and even though I was working, and why? Because it was important to me. But maybe some people don't have to devote that much. But I tell everybody, all my clients, you have to start with at least 1 hour a day as a gift to yourself, right?
Mm,
And you are to do anything that helps you be a better person physically or mentally or emotionally, spiritually, I don't care. But that's just like a minimum. And and it can get worse from there. uh, I started out at and living in an ashram where we got up at 3:45 every morning, had a cold shower, an hour of yoga, an hour of meditation, then we'd go out in the world and work and come home and an hour of yoga and then another hour and a half of meditation before you could go to sleep, which generally took you to midnight. And guess what? You did the same thing the next day. And in between, I was doing about 3 to 5 hours of martial arts. So the world becomes crazy. You don't age. You have all that energy. So cultivation of energy becomes Chinese energetic medicine, or what I teach, same thing, called medical Qigong therapy. And so all this is out there. It's just that we were taught maybe by the time you're 21, you don't have to do any of this anymore. And instead, it's like, oh, now you're ready. Now you can really kind of like get going. And I refer to it as lost generations. They seem more enamored of what comes on a cell phone, right? A little screen. So
mm,
we're meant to be interactive with the world. That's the way I look at it. So.
mm, mm,
And
mm.
you should have the scars to prove it too. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. And yeah, and the active investment in expanding yourself in whatever way is
yeah,
aligned for you. Yeah.
yeah.
You mentioned a few of the ways that you encourage your students to expand themselves. Can you tell us more about the way that you work and how do you tune into people and how do you align their fields? What's your process like?
Okay. So most people work a number one reality.
Yeah.
Take time and take their own energy from McDonald's and Coca-Cola or whoever. And you think about the sources of your energy. Oh, we'll make a whole discipline and call it nutrition. You
Mm,
see? Right? And so now we know that the body digests food, but where's the energy come from the digestion before the food get so you ultimately have to end up at an energetic state or input. Okay. So when you think about, well, what can I do? What I did was start expanding my ability to interact with that which was not number one reality. Could I know things? And people ask me, what's the first step? If you know your name, you know the first step because you know the truth of it. And so somebody says, I love you. Is that equal to the truth of me knowing my own name? And if it's not, well, maybe they don't love you. Remember, loves me not, right? So, so we start developing a sense of the truth. That's where it gets interesting because people hear their own voice, not understanding it's a programmed, experiential, memory based system that they have never explored as why do I hold memories of pain more than joy?
yeah.
Why do I like a certain color? And so I went through all that. I was crazy. What's your favorite color? And somebody would say, and then I had to, why do I like that color? Did somebody tell me I look good in it? Did I, and so that's that self-examination that only occurs when you close your eyes. And let's say I like the color red. I can think about, oh, I like color red, but give me a minute and let me see where that came about. I was 8 years old and somebody bought me a red shirt or something. And then I have to go through that and say, well, do I really like another color? And if the answer is no, then I like red. You see, there's no. So then we don't have to justify it. We don't have to explain it. We don't have to apologize for it.
Mhm.
All these different things. And the same way for our name. I don't have to apologize for being named Randy or defend it or the whole routine. Well, that's true of ourselves. Somebody meets you and says hello, and you say, "I'm Randy." That's it, right? We don't have to what I call justify our existence, right? And of course, how do we do that? Well, I'm rich and own a yacht, and I'm not justifying my existence. I'm trying to entice you. And
Mm.
so now we have advertising, right?
Mm.
And everything else. So the initial thing I teach is just to sit at night, um, just sit with your back to a wall. I give the first meditation as sitting with your back to a wall. The sacral area of the back, the middle of the back, and the back of the head all touch the wall. You're
Okay.
sitting on the floor. It's very strange. You have to sit very straight. And close your eyes. And here's the meditation. You inhale as deep as you can into your belly and go, I got up this morning, I went here and did that, got dressed, took a shower, blah, blah, ate food. You'll run out of breath. And then you take another deep breath. And now it's 9 o'clock and I went here and did this. And you just keep going. And eventually you'll get to one deep breath, and now I'm sitting in my bedroom. You do this before you go to sleep. And and then you go, thank you. We thank ourselves. And because you made it. You made it all the way through today.
Mm.
You experienced life throughout that whole time period. And and at that point, another thing happens. For 2 or 3 minutes, you're in a state of expansion to the point of knowing things, or we call it a state of receiving, right? You receive information, you learn to listen to the universe or to God or whatever you want to call it. And so sometimes messages come through, sometimes they don't, but all meditation, I get into it with all the different schools of meditation because I tell them all meditation is to get to that 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Now, sometimes time dilation occurs and an hour will go by and your head will come off the wall and jerk and go, what the heck just happened? And that can be 2 or 3 minutes later, or it can be 2 or 3 hours. Um, but at that point, get up and go to bed because you have accomplished certain, you have come back to yourself. And that return is something that people, if you don't do it, you're going to fight yourself for a long time. Okay. It's the absence of the self is addiction. The absence of the self is fear. Uh, it it goes on and on and on. Okay.
Mm.
And so that is the initial, and I've got a lot more and a lot worse that go on for 2 or 3 hours. So
Mm. Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
it
Mm.
depends on how entertained you want to be, right? So and I tell people we're worth entertaining ourselves. I entertain myself tremendously. That's why I do these. So, right. So
Amazing. Yeah, cool. When people are doing the debrief, do you encourage them to just mentally do that or to verbalize it?
I like verbalizing.
Yeah.
I like you inhale all the way down to the belly, push the
Yeah.
belly button out, and as you exhale, you're like, and I got up and I did this and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, and you'll run out of breath. Now watch, and at that point you go, right? That's important, right? Because now the physiological, I mean, there's all kinds of information about what you're doing. You're exhaling CO2 you've accumulated during the day because you've done shallow breathing, and you're reoxygenating the body before you lay down. You're clearing the subconscious mind, like there's more things to do during these meditations. They become more expansive in their effect on what we're doing to ourselves. And anyway, you're clearing the subconscious where it doesn't have to do that while you're sleeping. Okay. If you
Mm,
do the breathing properly, your body will relax and it doesn't have to do that while you're sleeping. And so the unconscious, non-conscious energy flows, there's all kinds of things that I could add to it. And it becomes a tremendous meditation.
mm,
And and the end result is like, golly, you feel great. You go to bed feeling great. You wake up feeling fantastic, right? And and at that point, you can go out in the world and annoy the rest of it. That's what I do. From an early age, they're like, "Why are you so happy?" I like it. You know what I mean? It's why aren't you happy? It's like it's the only way to go, right? In Hawkins scale, 540 scale of conscious joyfulness. You know, I love that. There was some other book, be or song, "Be Joyful unto the Lord," right? And so I always thought those two things were kind of the way to be. And the crazy part is Native American humor centers around joyfulness. Like
mm,
we really bad humor, almost as bad as the Chinese. But if you get around Native Americans, they play jokes on each other, they tease each other, they right, all of it in the name of getting a laugh out of it, right? And we work very hard at being able to tease people, right?
I
And we
love
find
that.
and we find joy in it. So
It's great.
yeah,
Taking joy seriously.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's better than taking seriousness seriously.
100%.
So yeah,
Yeah.
we
That's amazing. That's
yeah.
amazing.
The most serious people I think I've ever met have been like 7, 8 year olds. Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Oh yeah, they'll tell you which way the world is. They- They've they've told me everything from straighten up to don't be a cupcake. So so anyway, I thought they were very insightful, to my character, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Kids don't sugarcoat things, right? They just say things as they see it.
Oh yeah, okay. Like I said, that 3 or 4 year old be a you know like kind of like be a man cupcake. I think that's the whole quote she gave me. I was about 40 years old and I was teasing her pretty bad, but it kind of shocked me. So I immediately started crying and yelled for her mama that she was picking on me.
I
Yeah.
always feel like kids and dogs are a really good judge of character.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like
They uh, they know something we don't, right? Or are we lost as a better language, right?
more
That's
connected to the knowing.
yeah, that's why when you start with, I know the truth of my name and I can calibrate or measure, remember, 0 and 1. I can because
Mm.
my name is a 0. It's not a 1. It's not a physical thing, right? So our entire existence is a non-physical thing. And so, I'm Randy has nothing to do with this body. That's why, like I talked to you on the phone. There's no body present. There's a consciousness present. Yeah.
That concludes part one of our four-part interview series with Randy Veitenheimer. So join me for the next episode where we discuss some of the applications of the concepts that we've explored.